first time, and as a consequence, there were many bugs that accumulated over the years that were discovered. And if you don't get it right the first time, vulnerabilities do build up. And this is actually an interesting lesson in, like, for example, picking how you build certain systems. If you're going to build an alert system, does it make sense to actually implement it into the Bitcoin Core software? So pick where you deploy things very wisely. A few years into it, Sergio, who I believe is in the audience somewhere today, and will be speaking later, reported some vulnerabilities. Basically, the underlying nature of this vulnerability was a malleability in the signature of the alert message. And so this was fixed. Had a CVE number assigned to it. Then an idea was had for, well, what if there would be a way to have a final alert message in the event of the key being compromised? So this was implemented, but no final alert was broadcast at the time. So this was around 2012. Removal was circulated in the community for quite a while, but finally culminated in an initial pull request, June 2015, to remove it completely, and it was actually rejected by the developer community because removing it was a bit of a yanking off a Band-Aid all at once, and it seemed to be undesirable. So instead, it was made to be opt-out. And removal finally occurred in March 2016.
So as you can see, these things take quite a while to get community consensus. Be careful what you implement because it might take many years to get rid of it later. And so this removal included the implementation of the alert system, broadcasting, peer broadcasting of messages, and things like that. So then, after a while, after that was deployed, you have to wait even longer before you can actually truly remove it because there's no way to actually force the network to actually update. So you have old nodes still broadcasting alert messages if they are received. So retirement has to be this long-term plan. In 2016, the plan was to have a pre-final alert, then a final alert message. And then in version 14, the final alert message that was broadcasted was eventually hard-coded so that nodes would automatically send the final alert message when they initially connect. So there were a number of vulnerabilities in the alert system, which I will now disclose a few that we're aware of. All of these vulnerabilities were also disclosed on a mailing list email to the Bitcoin Dev mailing list, which I moderate. So one of the problems is that the way that alerts are stored, they're actually not persisted to the disk. They are just stored in memory, and there's a map, and doesn't have a size limit. So that's a pretty big vulnerability. You can just keep spam messages, and nodes will eventually run out of memory, and you can crash the node. So it's a denial of service attack, and that's actually the main type of attack against the alert system that I will be describing. Another problem is that they actually don't have a size limit other than the peer-to-peer network message size limit. You guys should encode limits to your messages and your data structures. It's really important. So it's another denial of service attack vulnerability if you can make really large alerts. So that's bad. Another problem was that there can be multiple final alerts because the fields that are required to define an alert message as final missed a few different fields. So you can make final alerts and you can spam a node and crash it by generating multiple final alerts. Now again, this is not actually a problem in Bitcoin anymore because all recent versions and the majority of the network, by vast majority, does not actually have the alert system implemented anymore. But then there was a really interesting problem that, this is probably the one that I like the most, which is that alert messages, as I mentioned earlier, can cancel other alert messages. Well, it turns out that the order that the code processes cancellation is in an order such that the current alert message that it's processing can cancel other alert messages. So you can cancel ones that cancel each other, and it doesn't check it in the correct order. So as a result, you can cancel a final alert and then DOS attack a node and crash it. So that's a fun exploit. So if you wanted something like an alert system, which I don't, but if you wanted one, what would you do? What would you build it as? Using a peer-to-peer message was an okay idea, I think. having it inside of Bitcoin Core was not okay, I think. One alternative that was proposed by Peter Todd and probably a number of other people, but I'm calling them Toddlerts after Peter Todd. It was just, op return and then burn a lot of Bitcoin to prove that it's a really big problem or something. And the size of the transaction would be proportionate to the magnitude of the alert or something like that. But if the system was being designed again, it would be useful to have like multi-sig alerts or ring signatures or some sort of deniable way or even some way where participants who have the key can identify who among the key holders was the one who signed a message or something like that. But honestly, you can just like use a mailing list or the news or something. Like people get their Bitcoin news from a lot of different sources these days, so it's not really required to have a entirely hard-coded alert system in Bitcoin Core. That's just not necessary. So the final part of retiring the alert system was retiring the alert key, by which I mean revealing the private key. And the reason for this is that the private key sort of gets this lore associated with it, where certain people have the key and certain people don't have the key. And it becomes a bit of a liability, actually. And since there are some people that are publicly known to have the key, if in the event that a message was signed using the key, then those people would become suspects, and it becomes a very difficult situation. So instead, the idea is, and this has been planned for a number of years, to reveal the private key, and then everyone has the private key, and the value of it becomes essentially zero. Before that occurs, it was very important to ask out to the community if anyone has concerns about it, or if there are any altcoins that still use the public key for any reason, things like that. I actually did get, one piece of feedback from one project, and someone else asked a few years ago as well and started to look around the community. So that was interesting. It seems that it is good and dead, so it seems like it is safe now to reveal the private key. Plus there was like media coverage of it, so everyone knows this key is good and dead, don't use it. It's just a historical curiosity now. So here it is. All right, that's all I have. Thank you. I've been told to answer questions.
Yeah, okay. So we'll have two runners. So you just raise your hand if you have a question, and we're gonna give you a mic.
Hi, thanks for a talk. Do you know an example of any useful alerts having been published on the Bitcoin network?
Did you say useful alerts?
Yes.
There were a few alerts, actually, yes. And the Bitcoin Wiki alert system page listed a few of them. I believe one example was the 0.8 incident, or the one described by BIP50. The alert system was used there, I think.
So the alerts have mainly been used for publishing CVEs?
No, not just CVEs, but like network events and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
You mentioned that it was very easy for developers to connect with each other and share alerts via the news and other channels. Why was it implemented in the first place?
Well, I mean, it wasn't developers that were sharing the alerts, it was nodes. But the question as to why was it implemented in the first place was that, and this is just speculation on my part, but originally when Satoshi released Bitcoin, the way that nodes found each other was actually based off of joining an IRC channel and finding other nodes that way. And they would announce themselves through an IRC channel. Originally, it was quite difficult for Bitcoin nodes to find each other and communicate with each other, and this was also similar for the Bitcoin community. And so as a consequence, I think early on the idea was that there would be a way to communicate through the Bitcoin network itself. Due to a lack of ideas for other ways to relay messages, I mean, if there was like no Bitcoin news outlets, how would people get information about the Bitcoin system? So I believe the alert system was set in place as one of the last things that Satoshi did because he realized he was leaving, and again, just speculation on my part, but I think that's what was going on.
Where the community is at now, how important do you think it is to have some kind of alert messaging system that isn't in core?
I think that's up to each individual wallet to decide whether they want an alert system. I don't think that Bitcoin Core needs one.
Is it known who had the original key in the beginning?
Yes, there was a list of people that are publicly known to have the key. And I actually don't know where that list comes from. I think it's just like lore or hearsay, because as far as I know, no one ever proved that they had possession of the key until I just released it. So I don't actually know how did people know that, like, for example, Thamos had the key. I think someone just said, oh, Satoshi gave Thamos the key. And then everyone's like, oh, okay, Thamos must have the key. I don't know if anyone ever asked him if he does. He probably did. But now everyone does, so it doesn't matter.
Is Dogecoin now in danger?
Dogecoin?
Yes.
I have no idea.
What would the procedure have been, assuming people who own the key wanted to issue and all that? Would they discuss whether an alert should be issued in an IRC, etc.?
Well, I don't actually know if there was a policy regarding like preferred procedures to confirm whether or not you should actually send an alert message. I believe it was just left up to the community to decide if you have an alert key and you think the situation warrants it, send an alert. So as a consequence, it's actually really unclear. And like as the number of people grow that had the key, you know, the chances of someone sending an alert message grew as well. And the alert system was removed and disabled as a consequence of that. So, yeah.
Were there ever any like malicious alerts sent or alerts sent that shouldn't have been sent?
I actually don't know. I don't think so. But the Bitcoin Wiki does have a list of some of the alerts that were sent. I don't know if it's a complete list, but it is a good start of a list. Okay, so I think we can all agree that this system is good and dead, and we should not use the alert system anymore. We should not use this key. The private key is known. Don't use it. Doesn't mean anything. If anyone signs using this key, it can be anyone. It's dead. Thank you.